My name is Willa Nash. I am 25 years old. At 23, I applied for my first apartment and discovered I was $340,000 in debt. I had never opened a credit card, never signed a loan, and never touched a financial document in my life. But someone had. For 9 years, someone had been opening accounts, filing tax returns, and running a business, all under my name and my social security number. I am a data analyst. I trace patterns for a living. And the pattern hiding in my parents' finances took me 14 months to unravel. Welcome back to Revenge Silence 30X. This is the channel where women share stories of family betrayal, quiet strength, and the boundaries they wish they had set sooner. If this is your first time here, please hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one. And wherever you are listening from right now, drop a comment and let me know your city and your local time. Let me take you back to a Tuesday morning in March, the day everything started to unravel. I grew up in a town called Millbury, Ohio, a place with a population of about 9,000 people. My mother, Diane, worked at a craft supply store right off the highway. My father, Carl, drove a forklift at the Greenleaf Auto Parts plant until the facility shut down when I was 14 years old. My brother, Todd, was 4 years older than me. He was on the baseball team, he was on the homecoming court, and he was the kind of kid my parents could talk about proudly at church without having to explain a single thing. Todd was easy, I was quieter, I liked math, and I liked building spreadsheets, which is exactly the kind of thing a 15-year-old girl does not usually admit in public. I started working at a frozen yogurt place the summer before my sophomore year of high school, making $7.25 an hour. I kept every single paycheck in a white envelope shoved under my mattress because my parents did not believe in bank accounts for teenagers. In my house, my parents never talked about money directly. My mother would say things like, "We are stretched thin this month," while she sat sorting coupons at the kitchen table. My father would just nod, drink his beer, and change the channel on the television. Money was a cloud in our home. It was always there, hovering over us, but nobody ever looked directly at it. I got into Ohio State University on a partial academic scholarship that covered about 60% of my tuition. I paid the rest of it entirely by myself. I worked 3 part-time jobs across 4 years, making drinks at a coffee shop, doing data entry at a local law office, and picking up weekend shifts at the campus bookstore. I did not know it then, but while I was counting nickels just to afford my calculus textbook, my name was already on a business that grossed $200,000 a year. You see, Todd got braces when he was 13, and they cost $4,000. Todd got a used Honda Civic when he was 16 that cost $3,000. Todd got his entire college tuition covered. My parents wrote a check every single semester for Bowling Green State University, totaling $32,000 across 8 semesters. I, on the other hand, got told, "We just cannot right now, honey." My mother had a specific phrase she used whenever I asked for something, and the answer was going to be no. She would tilt her head, soften her voice to sound sympathetic, and say that family shares everything and you will get yours when it is your turn. I believed her. That is simply what you do when you are 10, 12, or 15. You trust your parents. You assume the system within your family is fair, even when the evidence is steadily piling up that it absolutely is not. There is one specific memory that stayed with me. During my sophomore year of high school, there was a school trip to Washington, D.C. that cost $200. I desperately wanted to go, so I asked my mother. She checked the family checkbook, sighed, and shook her head, telling me, "Maybe next year, baby." Exactly 2 weeks later, she came home with a brand new dining room set. It was beautiful, made of dark cherry wood, complete with 6 matching chairs. I have no idea what it actually cost, but I knew it was absolutely not $200. I did not ask where the money came from. I did not ask why a new dining set was suddenly more important than my trip to DC. That is the reality of growing up in a house where money is a dark cloud. You learn not to look at it. You learn to look away, and you learn that the phrase family shares everything really just means that some people are expected to share and some people get to take. I was always the one who shared. Fast forward a few years, I am 23 years old. I have a degree in statistics from Ohio State. I have a fantastic job as a data analyst at a mid-size insurance company in Columbus, making a salary of $48,000 a year. I finally had my first real paycheck, my first real desk, and my first real nameplate. I went out and found a beautiful apartment on the east side of the city. It was a 1-bedroom on the second floor with a narrow kitchen but decent natural light. The rent was $1,100 a month. I could swing it, barely, but I knew I could swing it. I proudly filled out the application on a Sunday afternoon, paid the $35 application fee, listed my employer, my income, and my references. I turned it in with a deposit check and a smile that probably looked entirely ridiculous. 3 days later, the property manager called me. He cleared his throat and said, "Miss Nash, we are unable to approve your application." I was shocked. I assumed it was an issue with my income. Maybe they wanted 2 months of pay stubs instead of just one. Or maybe I needed a co-signer. Then he told me that my credit report came back and there were significant issues. Significant issues. I had never opened a credit card, never taken out a car loan, and never financed a single piece of furniture. I paid cash for absolutely everything because that is exactly how my parents raised me. We were a cash-only family with envelopes and budget sheets taped to the refrigerator. I nervously asked him what kind of issues he meant. There was a pause on the line. It was the kind of heavy pause that tells you the person on the other end is carefully deciding exactly how much to say. He told me, "Miss Nash, you may want to pull your credit report because I think you will find it informative." Informative. He chose that word very carefully. I hung up the phone and opened my laptop. Looking back, that was the very last moment of my life when I still did not know the truth. I navigated to annualcreditreport.com, typed in my full name, my social security number, and my date of birth, and I hit submit. The report loaded, pulling data from all 3 bureaus. I started with Equifax. The document was 47 pages long. It had my name and my social security number. It listed an address, except it was not my current address. It was 1847 Birchwood Lane, my parents' house. I scrolled down in pure horror. There were 6 different credit card accounts. There was a massive vehicle loan for $28,000, 2 utility accounts, a business line of credit, 7 different items sitting in collections, 2 civil judgments. The total outstanding debt listed next to my name was $341,227. I stared at the screen. The oldest account on the file was opened 9 years earlier when I was only 14 years old. I noticed that some of the accounts listed my birth year as 1996 instead of 2001. Whoever opened these accounts had deliberately changed my birthday to make me appear old enough to legally qualify for the credit. I sat down on the floor of my friend Cass's apartment, which was where I was temporarily staying because I had nowhere else to go. I read every single page. All 47 of them. My hands were shaking uncontrollably by page 12. By page 30, they had completely stopped shaking because the rest of my body had just gone totally numb. I did the only thing I knew how to do to process information. I opened a spreadsheet. Column A for the account name, column B for the date opened, column C for the amount owed, and column D for the current status. Once the data was laid out, the patterns became glaringly obvious. It was the exact same address on every single account, the same phone number, Different birth years were used to bypass age restrictions. And there was one business name that appeared repeatedly on 9 of the entries, Nash Event Rentals, LLC. I had never heard of this company in my life. The data analyst inside me took over. I stopped feeling my emotions, and I simply started tracing the numbers. I searched the Ohio Secretary of State Business Database and typed in Nash Event Rentals, LLC. One result popped up. The registered agent was Willa R. Nash. My full legal name, my social security number. It was filed 9 years ago. The status showed it was dissolved 4 years prior, but all the staggering debts attached to it were still active, still accruing aggressive interest, and still attached to my identity like barnacles on a sunken hull. The registered address was 1847 Birchwood Lane. The business type was listed as party and event equipment rentals, offering bounce houses, large tents, folding chairs, and cotton candy machines. I was only in the 9th grade when this business was legally created. I was busy competing on the math team. I was volunteering my weekends at the local public library because I thought it would look good on my future college applications. I was certainly not running an event rental corporation. But then the filing date caught my eye and froze the blood in my veins. September 18th, my birthday. The LLC was officially filed on my 14th birthday. I stared at that date on my screen for a long time. September 18th. The exact day my mother bought me a cheap grocery store cake with bright pink frosting and 14 candles. The day my father grilled burgers in the backyard and Todd showed up late because he had baseball practice. The day I blew out my candles and secretly wished for a new laptop because mine had a severely cracked screen. In that very same hour, while we celebrated my life, someone sat at a computer, typed my name, my social security number, and forged my signature into a state database. My mother gave me a slice of cake and simultaneously handed me a lifetime of crippling debt. I knew exactly who did it. I just did not want to say the words out loud yet. I picked up my phone and called home. My mother answered on the 3rd ring with a cheerful voice. "Willa, what a nice surprise," I asked her directly. "Mom, did you open a business in my name?" Silence. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. Then she laughed. It was a light, casual laugh. It was the exact same laugh she used when someone complimented her new dining set. It was the same laugh she used when Todd asked why I did not get a car too. She said, "Oh, Willa, family shares everything." She told me my father had lost his job and they desperately needed a fresh start. She claimed it was just paperwork. Just paperwork. $340,000 of just paperwork. I told her there were 6 credit cards under my social security number, a $28,000 car loan, a massive business I had never heard of, and 37 items in collections. She casually replied that they were going to fix it when they could. I reminded her that I was 23 years old, and she started this when I was 14. When exactly was she going to fix it? My father suddenly got on the line. Carl Nash, the man who spent my childhood telling me that a man's word was his bond. He told me not to blow this out of proportion and promised we would figure it out. He offered no specifics, no timeline, and absolutely no acknowledgement that what they had committed had a real name: identity theft. A federal crime carrying up to 7 years in prison. Todd called me 2 hours later. He told me our mom was crying because I was threatening to ruin everything. He defended them, saying they did what they had to do to keep the family together. They kept the family together on my credit, under my name, using my stolen social security number. Family shares everything. I heard that phrase my entire life, but staring at 47 pages of fraudulent accounts, I finally understood its true meaning. In my house, some people share and some people just take. Let me explain what $340,000 of debt does to a 2-3-year-old. You cannot rent an apartment, denied. You cannot finance a reliable car, denied. You cannot even open a basic low-limit credit card, denied. My credit score was 387, which is approximately the score of someone who has violently defaulted on absolutely everything they have ever touched. Except I had never touched anything. I was a ghost tenant in my own financial life. I officially moved in with my college roommate, Cass Donnelly. She had a small one-bedroom apartment in Clintonville. I slept on a deflating air mattress next to her bookshelf and woke up every single morning to the relentless sound of collection agency calls. 6, 7, sometimes 8 calls a day, all before 9 inches the morning, all automated voices demanding thousands of dollars. I started answering every single one, explaining I was only 14 when the accounts were opened, but they did not care. They just wanted a payment plan or a credit card number. Cass came home one evening and found me sitting on the cold kitchen floor, surrounded by my credit report spread out like a paper fortress. She told me this was not normal and that I needed to talk to a lawyer. I avoided it because I knew what a lawyer would make me do. I went to see Rebecca Holt, a consumer rights attorney with the Franklin County Legal Aid Office. I handed her the 47 pages. She read in silence for 9 minutes. Then she took off her glasses and told me this was one of the worst cases of child identity theft she had seen in 15 years. She explained that to clear debt of this magnitude, I needed 3 things: an FTC identity theft affidavit, credit bureau disputes, and a formal police report naming the perpetrators. The credit bureaus would not wipe away $340,000 without documentation, and that documentation required me to legally name my parents. I took a week to think about it. I barely slept. I did what I do best. I pulled more data. I ordered reports from Experian and TransUnion. I cross-referenced everything. The picture got drastically worse. My mother had opened 6 personal credit cards, constantly shifting my birth year to bypass security checks. Then I investigated the $28,000 car loan for a 2019 Chevy Tahoe. I searched the Ohio Bureau of Motor Vehicles database. The Tahoe was registered to Diane L. Nash at my parents' address. My mother was driving a luxury SUV financed under my stolen identity. She drove my debt to Sunday service every single week and proudly parked it near the door. I called Todd again and pressed him on the business. He admitted he knew parts of it. He knew Mom used my name because her credit was ruined. Then he dropped the final devastating piece of the puzzle. He told me they used the business money to keep the family afloat and to pay for his college tuition, brushing it off by saying, "That is family." His entire $32,000 tuition was paid with revenue from a fraudulent business registered under my name, funded by illegal credit, generating income on tax returns filed with my social security number. He went to college on my identity while I scrubbed floors and typed data to survive. Attorney Holt suggested I check my IRS records. I requested my transcripts. When they arrived, I read them standing up because the shock made my knees weak. Tax returns had been filed under my social security number for 7 years. In 2019, when I was 20 and shelving library books for $11.50 an hour, my social security number showed $78,000 in reported income from Nash Event Rentals. Over 3 years, $14,000 in tax refunds had been deposited into an account I had never seen. I called Rebecca Holt in a panic. She took a long exhale and told me this was no longer just identity theft. Filing fraudulent tax returns is federal tax fraud. Collecting mailed or wired refunds is mail and wire fraud. This was going to become a federal case. My mother called me a few days later, fake crying, trying to manipulate me. She said she was trying to protect me from the stress of their financial ruin. I told her she protected me by destroying my future. When her sadness did not work, her tone shifted. She became cold and strategic. She explicitly threatened me, saying that if I went to the police, I would be the one destroying the family, and she told me not to bother ever coming home again. That night, I sat on Cass's floor with a legal pad. I made a list of reasons to file the police report and reasons not to. Reasons to file: getting my life back, justice, a future. Reasons not to: my parents go to federal prison, my family shuns me. Cass looked at my list and told me I already knew what I was going to do. I was just looking for permission. She was right. But I needed to see the physical proof with my own eyes. I drove home to Millbury that weekend pretending everything was fine. While my parents went to the grocery store, I snuck into my father's garage and opened his metal filing cabinet. It was all there. The LLC registration, my forged signature written with my mother's distinct curled W, and a notary stamp. The stamp belonged to Linda Puet, Aunt Linda, my mother's best friend since childhood. The woman who brought potato salad to every barbecue and hugged me tightly. She knowingly stamped the document that ruined my life on my 14th birthday. I photographed every single page. I went inside and watched my parents come home. I watched them enjoy their new composite wood patio furniture, their double-door refrigerator, and my mother's closet full of brand new clothes with the tags still attached. They were living comfortably. They had been financially stable for 2 years, and in all that time, they had not paid down a single dollar of the $340,000 debt under my name. They bought a fire pit instead. Monday morning at 8:15, I sat at my desk and called Attorney Holt. I told her I was ready to file all of it. I filed the FTC affidavit, the Columbus police report, the Millbury police report, and 23 separate disputes with the credit bureaus. I meticulously typed my mother's name into the suspect field. When I hit submit, I went to the office break room and cried for exactly 4 minutes. Not out of guilt, but because the unbearable weight of it was finally in motion. 16 days later, my phone rang. It was Special Agent Miriam Torres with the FBI Cleveland Field Office. Because of the tax and wire fraud, the case had officially escalated to federal jurisdiction. I drove to Cleveland to meet her. She was calm, precise, and thorough. She revealed that the IRS refund checks were sent to a P.O. box and deposited directly into my mother's personal checking account. Sitting in my car in the FBI parking lot afterward, I stared at the concrete wall and said it out loud for the very first time. My parents are criminals. The next 7 months were sheer agony. The FBI raided my parents' house. My mother called me immediately, screaming that I was putting my own mother in prison. I reminded her that she gave the government my name first when I was 14. Todd texted me saying I was dead to him. My extended family shunned me, leaving angry voicemails asking how I could do this to blood. I changed my phone number. It was the loneliest I have ever felt, but it was also the safest I had ever been. The federal investigation was relentless. Agent Torres discovered my mother had been using the business account as her personal piggy bank to pay her mortgage, car insurance, and vacations. She even uncovered that my mother committed a federal crime called structuring, where she withdrew cash in amounts just under $5,000 to avoid triggering bank reporting alerts. Torres also pulled my high school attendance records. They proved I was sitting in my 9th grade math class, scoring a 92 on an exam at the exact moment Aunt Linda was illegally notarizing my forged signature across town. Holidays passed in a blur of isolation. I spent Thanksgiving eating Thai food with Cass. On my 24th birthday, Cass brought home a grocery store cake with pink frosting. I stared at it, thinking about my mother typing away my future while I blew out candles 10 years prior. I threw the cake in the garbage by morning. Finally, the charges came down. The grand jury issued 22 massive indictments across 4 people. My mother faced identity theft, tax fraud, mail fraud, wire fraud, and structuring, carrying a maximum potential of 20 years. My father faced conspiracy. Todd faced accessory after the fact. Aunt Linda faced conspiracy and false notarization. The morning of the arrest, Todd called me from the FBI office. He had turned himself in. He told me agents took our parents away in handcuffs while they were still in their pajamas. My mother's first words to the agents were a desperate attempt to blame me, claiming I was just an angry daughter. Todd tried to guilt trip me one last time, yelling that they were keeping the family alive. I coldly reminded him that I was a child with cash in an envelope and he happily went to college using my stolen name. He hung up, and that was the last time we spoke. Federal cases move carefully, but the consequences ultimately arrived. I did not attend the sentencing hearings. I did not need to see my mother cry in a courtroom. I had already spoken my truth through 47 pages of credit reports. My mother, the architect of this nightmare, was sentenced to 30 months in a federal correctional facility and ordered to pay full restitution. My father received 18 months for choosing to look away and signing the papers. Todd got 3 years of probation and a strict legal order to pay back the $32,000 tuition he happily took from my ruined identity. Aunt Linda lost her notary license forever and got 2 years probation. Weeks later, a letter arrived from federal prison. It was from my mother. There was no apology, not 1 ounce of accountability. She spent the entire letter blaming me, telling me she carried the family, and this was the thanks she got. I folded the letter and put it in my drawer. My mother stole my identity, got caught, went to federal prison, and still found a spectacular way to make herself the victim. The family split. Most blamed me, but Grandma Louise called me to apologize, telling me she was incredibly sorry I had to carry this burden. It was the only real comfort I received from my bloodline. 14 months after I filed the initial disputes, the fraudulent accounts finally began to vanish. The massive car loan, the collections, the business line of credit, all of it disappeared. My credit report shrank from 47 pages down to 3 beautiful, clean pages. My credit score climbed from 387 to 691. 6 months after the sentencing, I applied for the exact same apartment again. The same property manager called me back in 2 days. He told me I was approved. He handed me a small envelope with 2 brass keys. I drove to the empty apartment, sat on the bare floor in the afternoon light, and held those keys tightly in my hand. For the very first time, I had a door that was mine and a lease with my name on it, signed by me, because I chose to put it there. When I finally bought furniture, I bought a filing cabinet before I even bought a bed. I put my clean 3-page credit report in the top drawer. People often tell me I should just forgive my parents. They say holding on to anger is toxic and that family is family no matter what. But I need you to understand something crucial. This was never about anger, and this was never about revenge. This was about a little girl whose very name was stolen before she was even old enough to use it. A girl who worked 3 jobs to survive while her brother thrived on her stolen credit. My mother always told me that family shares everything. But the ultimate life lesson I learned from this nightmare is this: family does not get to share what they never asked permission to take. True love protects, it does not exploit. Boundaries are not a betrayal of your family. They are a necessary fortress for your own survival. The name on my door is finally mine, and I plan to keep it that way. If Willa's story resonated with you, or if it reminded you that setting strict boundaries is never a selfish act, please take this as a massive sign to check your own credit report or your child's credit report today. It is completely free and it takes 5 minutes. Do not wait until a $340,000 secret ruins your life. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please hit the like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and make sure to subscribe to the channel so you do not miss our next video. I will see you in the next one.